order the February 12th, 2019
Are you recording, Roger?
Sheldon School Board meeting at 5:32. Do we have any agenda amendments?
Well, just that the minutes of the 24th, I don't think were in. They may have been in the final warning of the meeting. They are. Never mind.
Okay. I haven't received any comments or correspondence. Anybody else?
I didn't check the box, so usually there's nothing in there, but just saying.
Okay, so we'll move on to approval of the January 8th and January 24th board meeting minutes.
I will make a motion to approve the January 8th and January 24th board minutes.
I will second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So business report.
I don't have a financial report. That was not supposed to be on there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think we're just going to be focusing on potential budget and bond tax rate stuff.
Okay.
But you do have warrants in front of you. Sorry. It's always my fault.
So I will make a motion to approve warrants in the amount of $418,931.15.
I will second. All those in favor of approving warrants in the amount of $418,931.15, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So old business, we have an Act 46 update.
I bulleted them this time. Have you heard anything more recently than I?
I'm trying to think of what's most recent. I think as far as the litigation goes, we're
Right.
waiting until it's the 14th or the 15th.
The 15th, there's a hearing for a preliminary injunction and, I believe, a motion to dismiss. I don't know if they will both be in that hearing. Depends on who you listen
Yeah.
to. But I did see an article somewhere that did reference that date being the same for the hearing, but that may not be the case. Not all the reporting has been accurate out there.
I have missed the motion to dismiss. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't heard that either.
Yeah.
Attorney General's office has been preparing it along the way. Part of the reason for the delay of the organizational meeting was that the state wanted to solidify its motion to dismiss at the same time that the parties wanted to delay organizational meetings. So it worked for both that
Gotcha.
way.
Okay.
Interesting.
In terms of the legislature, there was a lot of movement last week around a delay and a lot of confusing reporting. The messenger actually had a mistake in interpreting the bill that did pass the House. The first vote was on Wednesday last week, and that was a blanket delay with, I believe, the ability of boards being able to just vote whether they wanted to or not, which was voted on, and it went down. It was a pretty split vote. It was 69 for it and 74 against. And there was a lot of good testimony and conversation. The next day, what they were calling the Conlon Amendment did pass. They didn't have as much discussion because basically everyone said their piece the day before. And in that version of the House bill, a delay would happen depending on your particular circumstances. And I know that there's been a lot of unease about that. I think Heidi Schumerman, is that how she seems to be happy with it. It wasn't her first choice, but she seems fine. What it would mean for Sheldon would be a delay until 2020 for implementation, because we did not have a formal 706 study committee. We certainly did have a vote in our communities, but that vote was not to approve articles of agreement and to merge. It was a vote to approve our alternate governance study. And so that, although a lot of studying certainly occurred, it just didn't fit that intent of that law. So at this point, though, only the House has passed it. There is no current movement in the Senate to take it up. So I'm sure there'll be fighting this week about it. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there'll be conversations and advocacy in committees about bringing it to a vote. But it's not on the schedule for this week as of now. So I guess that's the legislative updates. I mean, we're not, at this point, there is no delay. I mean, I had friends texting me and things saying, yay, you've got a delay, but no, it just passed the House.
I wonder at some point, I guess I've been curious about the whole idea of a delay and some of the stuff I think the Conlon Amendment had brought up was that towns that had, or school districts that had voted or had formed 706 studies
Right.
had essentially done some work around articles of agreement. And there was talk of existing districts voting to accept districts that are coming in. And I wonder, that all brought up for me the fact that Franklin Northeast never voted with Sheldon
No.
in their articles of
Right.
agreement. And so I just wonder what that means.
Well, what happens when you are forming a union district and you have articles? You can go to the voters, and this I know this because we did a lot of research about the founding of MVU. So in the late 60s, Highgate and Swanton voted to accept other school districts who wanted to join with them in building their high school, and they explicitly named Alberg and Franklin. Alberg said no, and Franklin held its own vote and voted to join, and then that was how that happened. So in this instance, they voted in their articles to accept particular schools, but you didn't get an opportunity to vote because of the way Act 46 and 49 was laid out. You were merged. If there was no imposed merger part to this law, Sheldon would have an opportunity to vote to see if they wanted to join.
Right.
But that's why it's probably in their, I think it's in their articles.
Sheldon was never mentioned. So, and this is just from what I can
Interesting.
find, but basically what I can find is in their articles, it was Berkshire, Bakersfield, Montgomery, and Montgomery was advisable and all of that. What I've been able to dig up about Sheldon is that Sheldon was mentioned in their study, their 706B study around, where you had to examine like the
Neighboring configurations.
the impact of
Yep.
neighboring districts. And so Sheldon was mentioned as a neighboring district that would, if the Franklin Northwest merger happened, would be isolated.
Yep.
And that, I think it said they'd be open to that conversation or something, something along that
So it's in the
line.
minutes or something like that, but
So
not
does
something that was voted.
So I just wonder if that, because the articles of agreement had to have been voted on by those three towns. And I wonder if, because Sheldon was never on the table.
Formally to the
Right,
voters. Yeah.
Right, the legality of Sheldon now being put into those articles of agreement.
I don't know.
So it might be a question for Pedro at some point, which is kind of odd because he does both districts, but. And maybe it doesn't matter because it's a forced situation.
Right, because in this instance, we will know when the lawsuit is settled whether the State Board of Education has the authority to put you there or not. They do have the authority to move you to another supervisory union, and I have an update about that afterwards. But that's, the lawsuit will really decide that question about the authority of the State Board and the agency there. So that next piece, support for a letter, Lynn Coda and I were speaking right when the House was passing that delay. And, bless you, the opinion and it is interesting because, we use the same school attorneys, but sometimes it depends on the question that's asked. Sometimes the answer is a little different. But we are concerned because the state board does have the authority to move school districts into other supervisory unions, and the way that the motion was made in the state board decision, which is very broad, all of the things that need to occur to move Sheldon into that district, which also really includes moving you to another supervisory union. We want to be unified between the two supervisory unions, that we do not support, should there be a delay, that we do not support moving Sheldon to Franklin Northeast just because, right? We would be petitioning the state board to say, look, there's a delay. If it all comes to fruition and we do move forward with Act 46 in 2020, we would ask that you don't just move Sheldon to another SU outside of that implementation. So I wanted to, I think I'm going to be writing a letter anyway, but it would be nice to have a motion from the board authorizing me to write that letter, and I may not need to, right? But if there is a delay, I'd want to write that letter on your behalf.
Will that be a joint letter between yourself and Lynn, or will you
No,
write
we'll write two
separate?
separate letters. Just bombard them with,
Yeah. But they'll both be along the same
yes.
vein.
Yeah, we're in 100% agreement there. It
Yeah.
would not be good for anyone.
Want the motion now?
Yeah, I'd support that.
I will make a motion for Julie to write a letter in support of a continuation of a delay until 2020. Is that what we're looking at?
If we get a delay.
Right, if there's a
that
delay.
we request not to change supervisory unions.
Okay.
Yep.
All of that.
I will second that motion.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor of authorizing the superintendent to write a letter on behalf of the Sheldon board in support of, assuming there is a delay, in support of Sheldon remaining in Franklin Northwest, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Thank you.
So merger transition activities, there's not an update at this point. The NMV meetings for February and March were canceled. So as far as I understand, we're just sort of waiting and.
Well, I was told they don't feel they have a quorum because now they have 8 members and they need 5 for a quorum, and they were told the other 2 have to delay, so they can't meet. Even if they were to meet and you would go just and observe, right? They can't really conduct any business right now.
Wow.
They are negotiating, though.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder if that's on behalf of the current NMB schools or if it's the whole.
I know that Sheldon's representative from the association has been
She's still going.
participating.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's it for Act 46 updates at this point.
Yes, I will have something for when we talk about the planning for the informational meeting. I will have, an Act 46 sort of overview presentation. I don't dare write it now because it'll change 6 times between now and the 25th of February, but at the same time, Swanton is having their informational meeting. They weren't going to have one, but then we decided to have some, so I'll write up a little fact sheet for the board there too, just a status.
Okay. Bond information meeting and town meeting planning is our new business.
All right, let's switch over for a while.
sent out, and you had all received what was the fact sheet sent by the engineer, and then today I sent, or yesterday, I don't remember, some revisions. What am I doing wrong? There we go. Sorry. It's quite all right. Let's see, there we go. So basically, he just walks you through, and I'm not sure what the intent of the board is, but that's kind of, I brought some options, and then we can go use it as a starting point. And so this is his fact sheet, just talks about the background, and then he walks through the different, he lumped them together, so the projects that would be proposed, he sort of lumped them together the way that the assessment lumped them, which is what we had asked him to do. My computer's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. There we go.
Excuse me.
There we go. So, I then I adjusted his contingency. It's a little over 17%, but it does still round to 17% to come up with a 1,700. And then I just thought it would be appropriate to put the proposed article language there to get people familiar with that. So this reads exactly how it was warned, and actually that was in the paper Monday.
I saw
If anyone saw that. It'll be in the paper the next 2 Mondays as well. And then I included some financing and estimated repayment information, just keeping in mind that what I have here is based on the repayment schedule that we had, and that interest rate can change. But I think that's important. Oops, I'm not sure why it's not responding the way I wanted to. And I wasn't sure about the timeline. I mean, I'm thinking that the board is understanding that we probably won't be on course to address much this summer. But I do think the consensus was that if there were smaller things, correct? So I had just put a little summary there. But again, this is just as food for thought. And then I wasn't sure if the intent was to hand this out to people that come and then have this as a reference, but I also put that fact sheet into a PowerPoint in case the board wanted to present. It's basically this is the exact same format, so again, a starting point, but I wasn't sure what the strategy was going to be yet, but
I think a PowerPoint is great, especially, I think if people can see it in different formats, then we can really identify on the PowerPoint what part of the fact sheet we're talking about.
right.
I think that's
And I
great.
think he did a really nice job summarizing.
Yeah.
I reviewed what Maple Run is putting out for their bond, and really it's a lot of the same information. Actually, I think what we have is a little more specific, gets at the nitty-gritty a little more. I did not include anything around tax rate. I'm a little bit uncomfortable because of including it in print per
Right.
se.
Yeah.
I have done work on that. This is what you're sort of used to seeing in your town report. Basically, your expenses and your revenues give you, your expenses minus your revenues give you your net ed spending. I'm just using a 3% increase here over last year's budget because we have, if we were talking a local budget, what you've seen, the drafts of has been a full expenditure budget, so it's a little tricky to pinpoint that right now. And then the interest of $45,000, if you look up here, the $45,014, which is the first year interest payment on the bond. So I'm just using that as your starting expenses. Revenues, I've only adjusted the ones that I'm certain of. So, for instance, projected transportation reimbursement, if you remember now, that's being net out of your expenses. So it looks like your revenues are way down, and then the carryover is the other one. Typically, we don't project, unless we're very certain that you're going to have a large carryover, we usually just come in with 0 and then we adjust it after the fact. So it does look like your revenues are down, which makes your net ed spending look like it's increased $459,000. But again, these are solely just estimates at this time. Really what we're trying to identify is what the impact of the bond would be. So this walks you through your equalized pupil number. This is still just a preliminary number that I have. It's down 7.68. Spending per equalized pupil is up about $1,500 in this. Property yield was announced at 10,666, but I'm already hearing through VASBO that it's going down, which is not a good thing. You actually want it to go up. I think it's 10.4 or 10.204 or something like 402, but that hasn't been formally announced yet. It's up to legislature. So then as we walk through your tax rate, we take into account your CLA, which is decreased to 103.33. If everything was to say, as I have it here, including the bond, the tax rate would be 1.381, which is an increase of 8.4 cents. If I take the bond interest payment out, the 45,000, whoops. You'll notice that it drops about 1.1 cent. So that tells me that the impact is about 1.1 cent. If we're talking about the interest payment, we know that the year after would be more significant than that because you would have that $165,000 payment.
Probably something.
Sorry?
Probably about 3 cents.
I would think,
Yeah.
So then down here, I just was showing you the impact of that 1.1 cents on a $200,000 house at this tax rate. I'm sorry, just the 1.1, I actually changed it. So just the impact of the bond is $22 on a $200,000 house if we're just isolating the bond interest. So it's minimal, as we've talked about lots of times. All these other numbers, your equalized pupil, what the yield gets set at by legislature, and your common level of appraisal that's set by the state all impact that number a lot more than adding to your budget or a bond repayment. But it does have an impact. This you saw last year too. It just kind of walks you through the same thing. See if I can get it to. You might not be able to see it, but basically it walks you through, if you recall, each factor. So the change in the property yield, change in revenues being received, change in equalized pupils, CLA, then I isolated the bond interest, and then the change in your budget. And if we look at the bottom, when I make those changes as we go along, it shows you here the impact on your tax rate for each one. And so here, see, this is the property yield impact. So you can see that going from the 10 to 20 over, if you can follow my little thing moving around, the 10 to 20 to 1066, so that increase of $400 and some dollars drops the tax rate 5.4 cents. So it has a very large impact on your actual tax rate. So that's based on the spending statewide. The next factor that I have is revenues, change in revenues, which is skewed a little bit again because of the transportation situation, and I don't truly know what the revenues are going to be, so I'm guessing right now. But that actually would help you, would hurt you by 5.8 cents, so that kind of negates the yield. And then as we move across, you can see here, this one's equalized pupil, and that's the drop to 372.78 from 380.46. Again, that increases your tax rate 3.12. So as you can see, as we move along, here's the one for the bond, is the 1.1 cent. So cumulatively, in this example, it's 8.41 cents. I think that's kind of like what you were looking for, was just to know.
Yeah, I think because everything else is so variable, it's hard it's hard for me to understand, much less explain to somebody else, because everything is so up in the air. But if we could just give people, like, here's the bond, this is not counting all the other factors, this is what it will do to that calculation. Just to give them some idea, and I know it's not perfect, right? And it's not, we would like to be able to say this is what your tax rate would be.
Right.
But with all of the factors.
But this should be pretty close as far as the impact of that bond. I mean, interest payment
Yeah.
could change, I don't know, $100 or so of a swing maybe, or maybe a couple hundred if the interest rate changes, but I don't think it will change that much, so.
I think your language around, if you have a $200,000 house, the $22, I think that would really resonate with people.
Yeah.
Examples like that, and maybe even if we looked at the following year with a larger payment, what would that look like? So if we can kind of forecast that, I think that will really hit people in a way that they can all understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I could if everything else stayed the same.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Yep.
It's just, and I apologize if it gets a little confusing or if I change too many things, but that's kind of how you have to do it to get to the
Right.
point that I
Yeah.
got to.
Right.
To be able to isolate it that way.
That's super helpful.
And
But
I
we
think-
can put
Sorry, go ahead.
language in the fact, I don't know if you just want me to put something like that, like we're estimating that the impact on your tax rate is 1.1 cent and just leave it at that for this year and maybe I can project for next year.
Right, and then
with the-
example, if your house is this, then here's what you can, so people can kind of
Yeah.
annualize it and
We just have to be
really.
really clear that this is only the impact of the bond
Right,
payment,
right.
so.
That's all we can control,
Yeah.
that's all we
Yeah.
can control.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the point I want to drive home when we're presenting this, is there is, and I think we've talked about this every year that I've been on board, is there's very little that the school board has control over,
Mhm.
right? There is so much more up there that
Mhm.
is controlled by the state.
Mhm.
Which is why we came up with this last year, because I think in a typical
really
year
like
when you
it.
have the other information, this really walks you through like
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
who has control over the impact of your tax rate step by step, you
Right.
know?
And here's our portion, what we as a board have
Right.
control of, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
And I'll
minute.
just show you, like, oftentimes taxpayers think, like, we know the 45 is 1.1 cent, but I could take 100,000 out of this number, and it's not gonna have nearly the impact of this yield.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
nowhere close.
Right.
Same thing as equalized payment. So oftentimes, we're like trying to scrutinize and reduce, and that's great to be efficient, but at the same time, if you look at bottom line to your tax rate,
Mhm.
it might be
Yeah.
tenths of a cent. So I can add that stuff, but I just wasn't sure what you were thinking about as far as presenting. If it was PowerPoint or just handouts or talking points, so.
No, I think the PowerPoint's very helpful.
Mhm.
We can even have copies of the PowerPoint if someone wanted to take that home.
Mhm.
With a fact sheet.
Yeah.
Whatever, I mean, the
It's
more.
nice for people to have something to
I
take
agree,
with them.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think the fact sheet's nice. The PowerPoint at least lets us focus on some things too. Instead of having the little
Yeah.
sheet, we can say,
Yeah.
okay, so this is what we're looking at here. Talk about that information. And that way, if there are people here, and if they have questions, we can instead of, because sometimes you have the whole fact sheet, people are going to jump around to what they see, and you say, okay, well, this is what we're talking about right now. So let's talk about this, and then we can go on to, instead of hopping all around all over
Right.
the place too.
And
Organized.
think about what of all of this you want on the website, on Facebook, if you want it in the same format, if you want it in a different format. Because we're not going to get, even if we have a good showing at the informational meeting, you're not going to get the number of people that really would benefit from seeing.
I think if we can link to both of them, the fact sheet and the PowerPoint, it just gives people different ways to view it, really.
Well, another reason why the PowerPoint is a good idea is that, Northwest Public Access will be there. And it just, zooming in on the PowerPoint, I think just helps reach more viewers.
Right, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I think we
Yeah.
talked about that last time. No one on camera is going to be able to see the handout, so
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
we get it out
Have we
there.
done a mailing, like a snail mail mailing? Have we ever done something like that? I mean, a lot of our voters don't use Facebook. A lot of them are not online. Is there something we could create and actually mail it? I don't know. Maybe we're thinking about.
You can put things in the paper too.
Okay.
If that, you think that would
Yeah.
reach that, sometimes
I'm
that
just
reaches
thinking-
that population. The
Yeah,
other-
there's, Sheldon has a pretty big population of people that aren't gonna.
We've done that before.
Mhm.
I think we're sort of, if the informational meeting's on the 25th, right? Anything we do sooner rather than later. You don't want to do everything too soon and then
Right.
lose your bang for your buck, but I think we've got to start getting something out there. And I didn't add any pictures because we can just pull them up.
Right.
They're not in a format where I could snip them, but I'm not sure that it would really work.
Yeah.
Or I could ask Peter to send me something that we could, if you wanted that in. I just thought, or I was thinking maybe of asking him for more copies of this for the informational meeting. But again, I wasn't sure exactly what you thought would be the most helpful, or how in detail we want to get, because also remembering that this is all estimates and proposals right now,
Right.
and we are going
Right.
to be continuing on, and maybe I should put something in here about that. That,
Yeah.
you know, this is based on the assessment and what we know right now,
Mm-hmm.
but there will be a lot more to come. As far as, you know, real design, real estimates, RFPs, bid process. So maybe I'll add a next
Yeah.
thing, if it's successful.
I'm wondering if we did a mailing or an ad in the paper or something like that, what would be the best things to put in it? Understanding that these numbers are estimates at this point, so you don't, I want to provide them to people, but I don't want people to feel like they're set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I would try to minimize that fact sheet even more.
Right.
Because, I
Yeah.
mean, you can't print the whole thing.
Yeah.
It
Right.
costs a couple $100 to print the warnings
Right.
once, so, because it
Right.
has to be the whole signed warning.
Mm.
Do you remember when there was the bond for the fire department to get the new truck
Mhm.
last year? And they really sold it. I think they had a brochure, a flyer, something that indicated the life of the vehicle. This is how much they've saved, and really justified it briefly in a way. And I think the background paragraphs
Mhm.
really start to do that. So justifying the spending, and that we have really taken everything for as long as it can hold at this point. Like, we need all new kitchen equipment. Why? Because it's original with the school. Like, things like, you know, we're not being hasty or greedy. This is well thought out, and here's why we're landing here. I feel like people are gonna wanna know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should definitely put some of those handouts, and maybe one of these at the town office by the end of the week. I don't know if I know when I'm in there seems to be an awful lot of a lot of people coming and going.
Yeah.
I'm always
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah.
So that might help too. But I agree with you. I mean, looking at, you know, you're talking about deferred maintenance and ADA compliance. People might not know what that is, but when they see compliance, they're usually thinking, okay, we don't have a choice about that, right?
Mhm.
You know,
And I feel like it'll make our school more enticing to maybe families who are looking to move here. I mean, Sheldon's a great community, but, you know, we need to make sure our school is on par with other schools. And I really think this will highlight our school and highlight the athletics program, which is doing amazing. Our teams are doing really well. I mean, it could all be selling points for people to come to our community, young families with kids, which will get our pupils up. So that's good.
Is there anything to, because I know we had discussed that the informational meeting, and we're talking about getting information out there, that Monday of vacation could be a difficult time to get people. Is there anything about going to a few of the practices and handing stuff out to the parents that are there? I mean, we're talking about gym maintenance and things, and those are some of the, that's one of our target audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, you know, and just letting them know, here's some information. Our meeting will be the 25th if you really want to come and get more, but, you know, it's almost getting that out to the people a little bit more. I mean, I know there's other people that aren't in the school and in the community that might need to get it, but getting that target audience that may or may not be coming to vote at town meeting and
Right.
saying, hey, this is,
So what would be some opportunity, I mean, we can obviously print up the fact sheets pretty quickly.
yeah.
I just want to finalize them, but
Yeah.
in a
But-
day or two.
Right, but what would be the prime opportunities for that
Well,
over
I'm
the next
wondering,
week?
even if you're thinking of kind of location specific, so you get a picture of the gym floor, right? And and it looks a little bit more like a brochure, so the information from the fact sheet, but with a picture, or it just,
I just know, like, you
know,
sit there, you've got
so
3,
that's-
4 K2 practices, 5, 6 practices going on. If there's some way to get the information, they're sitting in the gym. You don't even need to do a picture. You're in the gym. You've been
Oh,
at
yeah.
all of the
Yeah,
practices.
sure.
You've seen what it is.
yeah.
This is, you know, this is one of the things that we'd like to, and, you know, they're in the building already. They're not walking around and seeing everything, but they're there and getting them while kind of its prime. This is, you guys have gone through a season of this. This is your kid's future. We could do something to change that. So I just didn't know what that
And we
was.
could highlight it, like the gym floor, I totally agree with you, get people while they're interested in, you know,
Yeah.
in what they care about, but
Yeah.
I would prefer that if it's marketed, we keep all of it together.
Oh, right. I wasn't going to say just one
Well,
thing.
no, but I
No.
mean, yeah, okay, all right, I thought you meant
No,
like
I
just the
meant-
gym floor.
I was the
No,
whole
meant
thing.
just a
The picture, okay.
You know,
The
Yeah.
visuals.
I was going to give like the
Yeah.
whole fact sheet, but just
you're right,
saying,
you're there.
Yeah.
those are, you know, I know there's a number of people who are involved in athletics that the gym is, that floor is a
Concern.
big thing. And so
Yeah.
that's the first hook to get them
Yeah.
in. And then, okay, so look at, there's the, I say cosmetic, but you know, the siding. And I mean, there's a lot of great things, but you
Yeah.
know, that's one group that they're onto that. So they're there. I don't know. I was trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to get to,
Yeah.
And then ask them to actually come vote.
right.
That's-
And say,
That's the other part.
please come vote. And that's because I don't know how many of these people vote, but now here's something to come and vote for, you know, whichever
Right.
way you feel about this,
Well,
but,
we have a number of new families
right,
at those practices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can think of 3 or 4 in particular.
yeah.
So
You know,
what
they're new
about
to Sheldon.
like a trifold brochure? And we could put in pictures like, I'm trying to look at the big pieces. You know, you could put in where you have, you could put in a picture of what the classroom exterior doors would look like with the new, I know it's just like a very basic sketch, but what the windows and door will look like, what the gym looks like now.
For me, I mean, I have no problem doing any of that, it just depends on when you want it to go out. Or if we do something now to get something out immediately, and then I can try to get that together by next week.
Calendar.
If you send me like, or just send me an email with like, here's a picture, or just tell me which picture you really specifically want.
Did Cross send any pictures of like the potential of what it would look like? Did he draw something on like CAD? This would what a new
No,
vestibule
because
would
I
look
don't,
like?
I think purposefully, he's not being that specific, because he wants people to
Gotcha.
understand that we're not there. We haven't gone to the design phase yet.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of thoughtfulness in this, I think you have a pretty good idea, but
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to, like, even if we put in, I don't know, would it just be putting in current pictures of what things look like?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the floor, this is the holes in the siding, like, we got a couple of
Yes.
pictures of,
Yes.
this is what it looks like, and so, a few of those big areas that we want to
And it's time
fix.
to take
And
care
then
of
we
our
have the
school.
other point, you know, the kitchen equipment, which people don't see, so nobody knows about that.
Right.
Like, people walk through and they don't really think about that.
Someone can stick their head up in the HVAC and
You know, and then you've got the other ideas of, you know, the bathrooms and locker rooms that'll
that's a good idea,
ADA
Sean.
compliance, and then the fire system. I mean, there are certain things that you know you can, and you're talking about safety and security and things like that. So
I
just,
don't know if we have those pictures, or if that's something
I don't know,
Amazing
yeah.
can do. I don't know if they took pictures when they walked through, I'm assuming they did.
I bet it would be easy
But-
just to go through and.
So we're looking to see if we can get some pictures of, say, the gym floor, the hole in the siding, maybe a bad kitchen equipment picture.
Bad windows.
You know, when you're doing a trifold, just be aware that there's not a lot of space on a trifold in a brochure. So you've got, if the more pictures you have, the fewer information you can have.
Yep.
So you obviously won't have all of this in a trifold anyway. So you'd want to be, I think the pictures are very powerful. You'd probably just have some bullets. And then come vote, come to the informational meeting.
Check out
And
the
then-
website, it'll be on.
Right, and then I think you're gonna wanna have the more detailed fact sheet available at the front desk, in the town clerk's office,
I
on the sites.
yeah, bulleted points, couple pictures, bulleted points, and then give them, like, on the back page or whatever, okay, so this is where informational meeting, come vote, you can pick up at the school, at town clerks, you can get more detailed information about what's going on, fact sheets, if you're interested and you can't make the
Go
meetings.
online.
Go online,
Yeah.
and that way, you know, the brochure is just there to
It's a hook.
get awareness, get some maybe interest in this is
I
what's
think
going
it's
on.
great to have the brochure with, I mean, so there's the practices that are all
Yep.
coming up. Next week is the YRBS, Youth Risk Behavior Survey,
Oh, that's
Community
right.
Dialogue Night.
A lot of people
There's
going to
lots
that.
of people that come to that.
That's right.
So there are a couple, events coming up that,
You could put it on the Sheldon Athletics Facebook page too.
Yep.
There's a
The
lot, there's like a
PTO.
cohort on there,
PTO
yeah.
will do that too.
Yep.
There's different people that look at all of them.
Yep.
Mhm.
So what's a reasonable timeline for getting this turned around?
This week's a little booked with board meetings the
Yeah.
rest of the, but I don't, I think we can get out what we already have, and then the trifold thing, I can get out as soon as I can make it, but I don't think it'll take too long.
Mhm.
If I get if I get
Yeah.
some pictures from you, you just take them with your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you remember, I feel like we did a mailing either last year or the year before.
We did a postcard mailing.
Yeah, was it, how long did that? It was labor intensive, wasn't it?
Yeah,
they
If I
are.
remember, the stamps or something.
Yeah.
Would we want this to go
We
out?
also need to get something printed, or
Right.
cut our own postcards, but they have to be of exactly the right size, and
Right.
can't deviate
We
from.
cut
I've done
'em
that
up. We
before.
made them and we cut them and we stamped them and we,
We could try to use some kind of a synopsis too to put in the paper. I think that's not a bad idea.
Mhm.
I could try to come up with something and then send it out and just, it has to be in by noon the day before. But something like that, it might be better to have right before the informational meeting, like get that in the 24th or something, I don't know. I don't know if the Messenger is as widely read up here in Sheldon
I
as it is
think-
like in
I think
Swan.
Messenger,
and- yeah.
County
get it.
Courier.
Okay.
I do not.
Like if it went in the messenger on the 21st, that way,
Give enough time.
yeah. Messenger and or courier. What would be the most efficient, trifold or postcard or?
You're not gonna get much on postcard.
Right.
no,
I mean,
Postcard is good for remember to vote,
Right,
or
which
something,
I think is
you
what
know.
we did.
Yeah.
I think that's why we did the postcard, was a
Yeah.
vote.
I think I'd like the trifold, because then you could even set that up that we could still have the categories that we had, so. The
Life safety.
Life safety, and then here's some things, maybe a picture at the bottom, or on there, and then the next one, a picture and some bullet points, a picture and some bullet points, and then,
Now, is this with the idea of mailing the trifold out? 'Cause
That would
then-
be my.
Then you need to
thought.
have a space for address labels.
I wonder if the town clerk's office has like a mail merge already in their system. They must, ready to go. No?
No.
Yeah.
Well, they
What
must
happened-
do the labels.
Yep, I think we did the labels.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
see if,
but maybe they sent you something.
Like an Excel document or something.
they have to have
So-
mail merge. They have to.
There's a lot of, and there was a little bit of, if I remember correctly, there was a little bit of controversy, like, do you want everyone that's registered to vote, everyone that pays tax, like, it was, there were a couple
yes, I do
different
remember.
lists.
Yeah.
And there were people on the list that don't live here anymore.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
And there was some
So-
issue, I remember
Yeah.
Jason McConnell saying because his address goes through Enosburg,
Yeah.
he didn't get a postcard.
Right.
Well, I know even now when we mail things in Swanton, it's taking like a week for people to get
Right,
a
yes.
letter. So like we'll mail a board packet and sometimes it's 3 days and sometimes it's like a week later it all of a sudden it shows up. It's just not as reliable and
Right.
consistent
Yeah.
as we hope.
I bet we
Is-
can make it. My mother-in-law's a mail lady. We'll have her get them right out. She delivers everybody's
There you
mail in
go.
Sheldon.
Right
here.
But I think they all go
Someone to
somewhere
send them
else
post.
first now.
Through St. Albans, I think.
No, I think they go to like Waterbury.
Waterbury,
Or somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then, and particularly
they're
if we have
filtered.
something that's a bulk mailing, that gets treated differently. The things you learn.
Right.
So I know,
And I think the bulk really, they have to run through their machines.
so a brochure may not be good.
Well, I
Don't
think
know.
it can.
It can? Okay,
It
good.
can't, I think it, I don't remember. I think it can't be folded until after it's run through the machine or something.
Oh, you wouldn't put it in an envelope, you mean?
Well, you can do
Oh, we
the,
wouldn't.
if it's the bulk mailing, it's the one that's, you can have it folded and
You put a sticker on it or something.
then, so you can do it that way,
gotcha.
or you can do it in an envelope. Yeah, so that's another to figure out.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the calendar. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be,
Yep.
but it's gonna be tight.
Yeah.
So if,
needs to get in.
if we want to do that, and we want it to be in the messenger on the 20th, basically, we'd want people to receive it before the 22nd, which is
Right.
only 7-8 days away.
Yeah.
So do we just stick with a paper, like a messenger and an electronic Facebook type thing? I think we're gonna have to.
Yeah.
Who's gonna make how many brochures and stuff them, and who's gonna do that?
Right. And I don't want us to do it if it won't be effective or if it won't reach people in time.
Well, right,
Yep.
it's a huge waste.
I mean, the other idea is.
I think you'd almost get as much, because the point is to get people to turn up to vote.
Right.
Mhm.
So maybe you just print something saying, we're proposing a bond vote, X amount of dials for, something very simple, reminding them to come and vote, and then there's an informational meeting, that could go out tomorrow. And that could be mailed tomorrow. That would be very simple. I don't know, you wouldn't have all the information, but people who care have the opportunity to come to hear more.
Could we still do something like that and still create some brochures or some things to pick up a town clerk at
Yeah.
school, like
Oh,
put
yeah,
on
I'm
there
just
and
worried
still
about
right,
doing that
the
and
mass
mailing
mailing,
it.
right?
I'm not sure
Yeah.
what's gonna get to people in time.
Yep.
And then if it gets there after, people will be mad.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll do a mailing of like a postcard. And
Well,
then
it might
have
be just
brochures.
easier to do a single sheet of
Right, a
paper
single
and
sheet
then
of
stuff
paper.
in an envelope.
Right.
Okay.
With labels, rather than cutting postcards. I don't know.
It, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
it took 3 days
Yeah.
Yeah.
for
To stuff all those
our,
envelopes
Yeah.
and.
for the office staff
Yeah, that's
to
a
try to
lot.
turn it around. And they did it all. I
Mm.
mean, it was Jamie and Caitlin who did it last year, so.
Yeah. Or you send the whole fact sheet and put it in an envelope. It might not be ideal, but I'm just trying to think of something to meet the timeline with the mail. You could send that, you stuff one piece of paper, you stuff two, I don't know.
Right,
if-
if you're
Right.
gonna put something in an envelope.
Add the
you could
dates of the
put-
informational meeting,
Right.
encourage people to come vote.
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know.
Question is, how effective is snail mail versus Facebook, Twitter, the website, and going to events?
I feel like if we're putting it in print in
In
a
the newspaper.
paper, I think a lot of the audience we're trying to hit with snail mail get the paper and read the paper. That's how they get their news. So I'm hoping that audience is going to be the same, similar audience.
And I mean, the information is already in there and the informational meeting and everything, but you can barely read the warning, to be honest with you. Like, but, I mean, unless you're looking for it, you
Right.
know what I mean? I was thinking like, get them to print some bullet points and,
Yep.
So what if we did this? What if we create some sort of like 1-page fact sheet or something that we'd want in the paper? We could also take that and maybe talk to some local businesses and ask if we can post it at those places. We could post it here, and then we could also have some brochures. We wouldn't nearly need as many as a mailing, but we could have those brochures here, at the town clerk, and whatever that goes in the paper and whatever gets posted says, come to the informational meeting, pick up a brochure at the school, or, and then
I
come
mean,
vote.
we can send a brochure home to our families.
Yeah.
Right.
In
Yeah.
like Friday folders and
Yeah.
stuff, but
That way it cuts down on the actual time it's gonna take to get it out.
Right.
I never even got that postcard, so, you know, that,
That's the thing.
I
Yeah.
think we miss a lot of
Yeah.
people. And that might reach the maximum number of people that we can.
we can also do an alert now call
Mhm.
right before,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
Sunday or Monday even,
Mm-hmm.
just to vote,
Yeah.
just to remind people to
Mhm.
vote,
It's not a bad idea.
or whenever. I mean, it could be sooner than that.
Could we do it on the 22nd for the informational meeting?
Mhm.
And also one before town meeting day?
Yep.
So also, I wanted to ask you about town meeting itself
Mhm.
and when school business will be taking place. I mean, obviously, a bond vote is Australian ballot, which I assume happens throughout your day. But we have 3 town meetings and 2 bond votes and 1 vote on something else. So we wanted to make sure that we had the right level of support in divide and conquer for all 3 schools. And so when does Sheldon typically do your school business? And what kind of support will you need?
So in years past, it's been after lunch, however, last year, so it sort of goes by how quick the town meeting, the town part goes. Last year it went really quick. I think we finished our school meeting before we even had lunch.
Yeah, I think by the time I got here from Highgate, I think the meeting was pretty much done.
Yeah.
So what do you we want to talk about the informational meeting and how you want that to run as well, but I also didn't want to forget to ask you, because it doesn't, I will pop into all 3, but I want to be somewhere where I can be helpful. If people want, if there are any questions or anything, and so I'm trying to make sure we prioritize. And a lot has to do with how you're voting, what kind of presentations you're doing, and all of that. But maybe we should back up and just talk about the informational meeting itself. Laura's done a PowerPoint presentation. She'll share that with you all, and how would you expect that will go on the 25th?
You mean like the?
Like, will you be presenting, taking, I mean, usually that's the case, but I didn't want to make assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect we'll sort of just go through the PowerPoint, and allow for questions as we go and just sort of
Okay.
have a conversation. Because I'm sure it will depend on what people have for background when they come. So,
It's not what it's gonna look like, I'm just leaving myself some reminders.
And I will put together the Act 46 PowerPoint. I'll do the same thing. And I'll be happy to start that conversation, and then you can jump in with, your experiences with NMVU and whatever's pertinent.
yeah, I expect there will definitely be some overlap between the 2 conversations
Yep.
at some point during the night. So, but what I suspect at this point for town meeting is the conversation will focus on the bond, and that's just my guess is that because that impacts more people. directly.
No, I can't remember, is that part of, well, would that be discussed in town meeting, or because it's Australian ballot?
It can be discussed,
It
it
can
just had to
be.
be warned separately.
I would assume that people are there, they're gonna have questions, if, you know, that you would discuss it.
And of course, any other questions that come up, I'm just sort of anticipating that will be, if there are questions, that will be what they're on, or Act 46.
Right.
Yeah.
Why aren't we voting for any?
Yeah, why aren't
Why aren't we voting for a budget? Why aren't we voting for board members?
Yeah.
I know, the same, that's why Swanton, even though they don't have any business on, because they're all Australian ballot, they don't have any business, but we wanted to have just the board attend the informational meeting for the few people that will come. But it's joint with the village and the town, so you might get, 10 people. And they will ask, why aren't we voting on a budget?
Yeah.
Why aren't we voting on board members?
And for that matter, it'll be important that I somehow identify, I almost should do it in this PowerPoint, that this is only a local projection, so that 1.1 cent is only if things stay the way that they are.
Oh, yeah.
If that
Good
changes, I have no idea what the tax rate impact will be.
Right.
Because
Right.
it'll get thrown in with a whole bunch of other stuff and divided
Right.
all together, and who knows?
Different equalized pupil calculation, the whole 9 yards, yep.
So we'll have to make sure that we clarify that.
I'm hoping the informational meeting goes, I'm hoping we'll be able to walk through it slowly, because I think there's a lot of factors. Not necessarily the bond, but how, that tax rate impact and.
Will this be shared just by Sheldon? Or
Right,
will this be
right.
shared by Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery as well?
Yeah. So,
And the answer is it depends, which is a great answer.
It's the answer to all the questions.
Right.
Well, you see.
Scenario A. Yeah. So the answer to town meeting, I think we've got the informational meeting. But the answer to town meeting is you don't really know when.
I'm trying to remember if I've seen anything on what the town is addressing at town meeting, just to try and
Right.
forecast if there'll be a lot of discussion. I know there is an article for a 5-person select board, so that might take up some
Mhm.
discussion time.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure if there's anything else on their agenda.
It wasn't, no,
You don't see anything?
nothing that's gonna, I think your point of the 5-person is
Right.
gonna take probably most time in terms of conversation.
So we'll make sure that, especially having had the informational meeting, you'll be well prepared to answer questions.
Mhm.
But we want to, I just wanted to have some general idea, because I want to be in 3 places simultaneously.
I,
And we want to support Sheldon. We don't want to be like, wow, the orphan district, or
Yeah.
whatever the heck you guys got called that time in that article.
if I had to guess, I would say 11-ish. That is pretty much a guess.
It gives us something.
Okay. Do we feel like we have, do you guys feel like you have everything you need from us in terms of publication and promotion?
Pictures, fact sheets, postings. Yep.
Would so, this is a very specific question, but for the messenger, are we talking about buying an ad, or are we talking about posting something like in the legals section?
I was doing the legals because it's less expensive, and
Okay.
unless, if you want something else, the cost goes up significantly.
Okay.
We've done that before. We've bought the front page, the part of the front page, or we've put in a whole leaflet
An insert,
but it's
yep.
definitely a lot more expensive. color, it's more expensive.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
I think the audience that you're trying to get to reads the paper.
Mhm.
Like, they don't
Yeah.
just look at the cover.
True.
You know what I mean? They actually, so I
Mhm.
think it will be okay to just put it in the legal section,
Mhm.
but make it, big
Good
enough
size.
and
Yeah.
grab their attention into the top, Sheldon bond vote, whatever,
Yeah.
not like the warning where it's a little.
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah, because I think if we do a school mailing,
Yes.
then the other people we're trying to get are the people that
Right.
aren't involved with the school all the time, and those probably would be the people
Don't have
that.
time to read the paper from cover to.
Right.
Right.
So the people that would
Right
read the
now.
paper, and then I think we cover our bases by
It's a different-
hitting
yeah,
Facebook.
right.
So yeah, but
Yeah.
nowadays the people who get the paper, I think, actually read it.
Easy.
Yes, they do. Cover to cover.
No, and that's not
Paper
enough.
getters.
But I think the
I
people
like
that
to
get
read the paper.
I like the
paper. Actually, get to
when I get my hands on the paper, I read through it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen all the time.
I blow it up on my screen and try to zoom in when I get the messenger email.
Oh,
and I'm like, I get the headlines.
Okay.
Can't actually get it online,
I have to pay for it.
I know.
It's cheap. I wait for it to come to the office. And
I end up reading like 4 at a time because I
Yeah.
forget. Like Saturdays,
I use my coworker's login.
Okay. Principal's report.
All right. Oh, it's up there
I
already.
did that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we just had we recently had our in-service, and it was kind of the second look at our data, and we looked at literacy data, math data, and social emotional learning or behavioral data. And the goal was to develop a list of strengths and needs, knowing that we were going to use those needs to develop our continuous improvement plan, to kind of forecast what our work would be, what our work will be next year. It was a really great conversation. We actually split it up to 2 days. We worked on that Monday, and then we worked again at our staff meeting because we had a lot to look at and to think about. And so the staff did a great job recognizing what our strengths are, and then where we need more. And sometimes what we need more is we need more professional learning. Sometimes we need to reallocate resources. Sometimes we need to just think about it differently. So it's not necessarily all around training, although some of that was. But I wanted to show you the continuous improvement plan this year and what that looks like. And it is developed in 5 broad areas, which are also part of the educational quality standards. So there's academic proficiency, safe and healthy schools, high quality staffing, personalized learning, and investment priorities. This past year, we didn't do any strategies in personalized learning or investment priorities, but we did do in the first 3. And so in academic proficiency, we looked at really 2 areas. One, finishing up our work around the instructional framework. It's year 3 of our 3-year plan to roll that out so that we have a school-wide instructional framework, we have a common language around instruction, and we have similar targets. And we've also moved our supervision and evaluation system to be in alignment with the Marzano framework, which is we just started doing that, but it matches up. The second strategy in academic proficiency was really around strengthening our systems and making sure that we had processes around our MTSS, so our multi-tiered system of supports. How do we identify students who are struggling? How do we identify students who are excelling? What kinds of interventions do we put in place to be sure that those students are getting what they need? And so we've spent a lot of time this year so far doing that. We've changed our master schedule to be sure that every grade level had a targeted intervention time, and in the middle school that it didn't happen during the block that also had band, because in the past it happened during that block, and so that left some
It's a
kids
choice,
out of
yeah.
a dedicated intervention time. So we changed our schedule for that, and also to be sure that we had our math and literacy interventionists available during those times so that they could support the grade level teams. And that is not possible K-8 with 2 people. But we do have, we absolutely have a really strong system K4. We have good support in 5, 6, and then we have limited support in 7, 8. The numbers are a little bit smaller this year in 7, 8, and there's 4 teachers and a special educator, so they've really been running all of their own intervention. We have had a little bit of push in, but not as much. So as we continue to try to figure out this, it's just thinking, how can we spread that support K-8, or what might we think about differently in order to be sure that all of our students K-8 have that support, knowing that it's not likely that we'll be adding 2 more positions. One of the last pieces in that particular strategy, though, is around calibrating PLCs. So the professional learning community work began in Sheldon before I started here, so approximately 6 years ago. And so it's time to kind of look at those PLCs and see, are they all high functioning? Are they all, are there, there's new members to the school. Is everyone clear on what a PLC is and does? I know that the first 2 years I was here, I did a lot of PD around that, but last year and this year our focus just changed a little, so it's just time to come back around and calibrate, and we'll do some we'll start with some self-assessment. So have each PLC look at what the goals of a PLC is, how close you are to meeting those goals, where can we provide a little support. They all work really well, but they're different. They all work slightly differently. And because PLCs are really the foundation of any MTSS, they need to be, they need to be high functioning. Otherwise, the intervention team won't get enough information. So we've, our last 2 CIPs actually have had a lot around MTSS. Safe and healthy schools, we're really looking at our social emotional learning, the supports that we have and the work that we're doing around there. We continue every year to be making the right kinds of moves. Our behavior data has shown a lot of capacity building, a lot of success in terms of some of the things that we're implementing, and those numbers are going down, and they are at or better than the PBIS goal data. So around, what percentage of your students are considered tier 3, what percentage are tier 2 and tier 1. So all of our data is at or better, but we, like most schools, we struggle with that tier 3 piece, when you have a kid, or a few, who are really, they just need more than a classroom intervention. What kinds of supports do you put in place? So that's the area that we still need to work at, and thinking about how some of our and asking ourselves, are some of the most important practices like social thinking curriculum, self-regulation work, are those really universal? Do 100% of our students have formal, and by formal I mean, is it universally taught to proficiency, right? Do 100% of our students have opportunity for that or not? And a lot of that work happens through the guidance curriculum. A lot of it happens through the classroom teacher. I wouldn't say we have a formal curriculum though. So my question continues to be, have 100% of our kids, and how often and who's doing that work. So that's where we are with that right now. And then high quality staffing, just ensuring that professional staff are working or intervening with students who struggle the most. Who is working with the student who struggles the most, and where are they getting the instruction for those places where they struggle. Building capacity around effective MTSS models. So it's really important for teachers to understand how this happens. We have been, despite the fact that this year we've really put in print kind of the processes around MTSS, we've been doing that work. But there still is a little bit of, when is the EST going to meet around this particular student? It's like, well, that's not exactly how it works, but here's where all that information and work is going and has gone, and this is how you're still in the loop, even though it may not look exactly like the old EST system. So that's been going well, but it's a little bit of a change. And then we refocused the role of the homeschool coordinator, with the homeschool coordinator getting certificate. She already had certification, but an educational license in social work. It is more than a homeschool coordinator, and we wanted to be sure that that person was also providing direct services to some students, so that she was picking up some kids on kind of a caseload to be able to support those sometimes tier 2 and sometimes tier 3 kids with some of the social emotional learning that they're doing. So that was one of our other goals. And then, like I said, personalized learning and investment priorities. We didn't have any strategies last year. On February 18th, Leslie Rainville, our instructional coach for literacy, and Heidi Mosier, who's an SU employee, will present around practicing and deepening content, just like Yeshua and Lori did last month around other standards-based instruction. And so that will be here. People get to sign up. It's an hour and a half or 2 hours of professional development that they can use for recertification. They've done a great job. The instructional coaches around the district have done a great job with this PD. So it'll be nice to see. And Leslie's actually going to do a kind of a follow-up to that, or I don't don't know, a shorter version of that at our staff meeting for, people. And they didn't know that in advance, but they do, if they're watching, for people who weren't able to go. And then, the doors are completely done in the K4 wing. We have handles and locks, and everything's going great. We have a couple kindergartners who can't actually, open the door without putting all their weight on it. They are sturdy doors, which is a good thing. But huge difference in that wing, just in terms of sound. When you walk down, you're like, whoa, that's made a big difference. So I think I've only heard good things. And then lots going on in February. We had a ski day today. We did come back. Usually we have an early bus come back that comes back for dismissal, and then a late bus that comes back for 5. We had everybody come back on the early bus today, just in case the weather was not good. But they had a great time. And they came in so quietly today. I think they were exhausted. So always
Very
a good
cold
thing.
today.
Yeah. If kids don't go skiing, we do a little bit of an alternative schedule, and then in the afternoon, we always do some other kind of wellness or physical activity. They usually go skating. Today they went bowling. They went to the Dairy Center bowling. They had a great time. They hadn't gone bowling yet this year, and they were thrilled with it. So we're supposed to have a middle school dance tomorrow night. We do, I think, 2 dances all year, and this is one of them. The YRBS Community Dialogue Night, Joanna's been working hard to get that set up. The kids are a little bit nervous, but pretty excited to share their analysis. They did a really nice job. And then Little League sign-up start. All the other, just kind of regular events. So, that's it.
Okay, move on to superintendent's report.
So I was hoping to look at mine because I wrote it a few weeks ago, but I didn't have a hard copy, so I was listening to Christy. So we'll see. I did start off. I have a lovely picture of the kids at MVU who had a financial literacy night event during the day, where there were many kids, and all of those tables had community members. There were about 40 community members that came out, and students all in their business classes had careers that they chose, and they did the research about, if I'm an English professor, how much money would I make? And I have 2 kids, and I'm divorced, or I'm married, or, it's amazing how many of these young adults thought they'd be single and wouldn't need childcare. But each of those tables had community members ready to talk to them about the expense of buying clothes, buying groceries, childcare, emergencies. There was a table where there were some folks, they had strips of paper upside down, and the students just had to randomly pick, and it's like, I broke my leg, or the boiler is leaking, or one of those sort of unexpected things. And it was really interesting to see the kids figuring out whether they were going to make a budget or not, and the decisions they were making about spaghetti versus pork chops, and whether they really needed, well, I guess I could just do a movie and pizza rather than, going out or doing these other activities. So it was terrific, and there was a great turnout, and the community was they're just so impressed with our students and how much they know, and I don't know, I was very impressed. We also had a group of students, of future business leaders also were there, and they're very active, and they're going to be going to Lake Maury for a competition in March. So they were sharing their information, and they're very excited to be competing. Let me see. Andrea Rasek will be leaving us. She's our early childhood director, and she has taken the position of special ed director for Maple Run, which is,
Ironic.
I have all kinds of feelings about that.
Wow.
That was my old position, of course, and the person in it now is retiring. I did encourage. I knew Andrea was going to apply, and I knew when I encouraged her that she would be a strong candidate. And I am very excited for her and for them because it is a very big job, and I think she'll be very good at it. And that does mean we will be looking for an early childhood director. We did have conversations about doing things differently, but Act 166 has really expanded early childhood tremendously over the past several years. And at this point, it does look like a position we need to keep. So we have posted that position.
Will it continue to be a collaboration with Maple Run?
Well, right now, they only collaborate in that they team together.
Right.
There's no shared expense.
Right.
So that is something we could look into in the future. Is there something that we could do again where we're sharing? I think that right now, given the number of partner sites, the number of students, the number of kids that we're tuitioning, and it's going to be another big hot topic in the legislature again this year. So I think we may come through the other side of Act 166 with an ability to share more. Right now, they share professional learning. They talk about students as a group because we share students, especially the babies coming in. So we have transition meetings with NCSS, Children's Integrated Services, when children are about to come through. I believe some of that they do as a large group because sometimes you're not sure if kids are going to be in St. Albans or Swanton or Fairfield or Sheldon. So kids move around quite a bit. So we wish her luck with that position. So we did have an early childhood update in here just to let people know what the numbers were right now. Right now, the numbers of children in Sheldon total 31 being served. That includes the kids who are 4 going to be 5 and the kiddos who are 3 that are going to be 4. Mostly you've got 4 and 5-year-olds right now. They have 2 speech and language teachers, 1 itinerant special educator, 3 early childhood teachers, 4 teachers that are duly certified in special and regular ed. I think that's something really to point out to folks. That's not the model most folks have. They have early childhood special educators, and they have preschool early childhood teachers, and you have almost twice the staff. And here we've really tried to have people with dual certifications so they're able to teach classes and then case manage the students who have special needs. And we give them time in their schedule to do both things. So it's pretty efficient and effective way to go about it. Here we also now have all of the different partner sites. So for the viewers, because Act 166 entitles children who are 3 and 4 to either attend a school program or to receive, it's almost $4,000 a year for their children who attend pre-qualified sites. And our program tuitions 58 children right now in these different centers. So it's kind of like your high school tuition, only for small children. And again, I did already share about partnering with the integrated services, children's integrated services. Pardon me. So, from the curriculum directors, we had a lot of professional development. We did just talk about the fourth, but also Maggie Roberts conducted some walkthroughs with the leadership team to see how teachers were applying the instructional frameworks that they had last year. Curriculum work is continuing in monthly meetings in math, literacy, social studies, and science. MVU had a very well-attended and excellent STEM fair on January 17th. Kosha and I were both judges, along with lots of real scientists. I felt like, I don't know, I was very, very insecure, and I was a very good science student, but there were actual real scientists there judging student work. And I'm looking at it like a teacher. It's very well presented, and you're doing a very nice job, and I like how your tables are representing. Yes, the students did a marvelous job, and it's just such a well-attended event. The families all come, and I was really impressed, frankly, with some of the middle school presentations. Were just top-notch. And so I'm skimming. Swanton service. I'm trying not to do all the other schools. Kosha is now representing us on the Champlain Valley Education Development Center, the CVED organization. She's on the board of directors, and they provide professional development for educators in this region. So she's going to be part of the group that will help decide what the priorities are and help create the PD that's offered to teachers in the region. And we all belong to that organization, and therefore our teachers have reduced costs for that PD. And it's always practical and related to the initiatives that are happening in our schools. And student services. Tanya is beginning to do her observations of first and second year special educators. It was always my favorite part of the job. And they're going well. She's really feeling that the staff is talented. And she's really focusing on the Orton Gillingham training and the other structured language training that's happening in special ed, so that we can really ensure that we have really highly skilled interventionists in special ed. People don't always know, but special educators are generalists. They're trained in the law and in processes, and they're exposed to different things. But it's when you come to school and get your assignment and the population you're working with, the training that comes after is where you really get to be expert, unlike a reading specialist that has to have a specialization to get that license. So people sometimes just assume that you have a lot of professional development in reading if you're a special educator. That's not always the case. And you've been very lucky to have that in this building, and you have some excellently well-trained teachers. We are examining pretty closely among all the laws that are passing and the work that schools have to prepare for in the next couple years. Act 173, which was the special ed funding law change. We have been having a lot of conversations as a leadership team, and Christy spoke very well about how much attention we're spending on multi-tiered systems of supports, because it's very clear to us that special ed funding in Vermont is almost twice the national average. Our outcomes, although good as a state generally, they're not as strong as other states in New England or across the country that spend much less. And so we have to think about why that is. Clearly, more is just not better, but intentionality, I think, is important in looking at data, making sure we have very highly trained people doing the interventions that are just right for that particular student. So we've been working with special ed staff, with the admin team, and we're going to continue to prepare for those shifts. There's a whole process that will begin with an average spending, and we'll be getting a block grant rather than being reimbursed. So they've done a nice job of trying to ease us into this new system, but it will be a big shift. So if Julie moves to town and Julie has an IEP that costs X, and we've spent all the money, obviously, we're still going to provide what's required, but we wouldn't be getting extra money. So it really is a different way of thinking about how you spend your resources and how we share what's regular ed, what capacity can we do it, can we have in say a third grade classroom with teachers who know how to intervene, or maybe there's an extra dose of something, or what's really specialized, like I need to go to a different school because I have very extreme needs. So all of those conversations will be happening over the next couple of years, because it is 2021, correct? Yes.
Is that block grant based on what is written into a student's IEP?
No, it will be, there'll be a dollar amount, eventually, there'll be a dollar amount associated with how many students you have in your school, period, your average daily membership.
So they're going to be taking an average of, like, the average number of special education students.
Nope. So if I have 1,000 students in my school, and the state average spending amount is $11,000 and change, you'll get that amount of money. You'll get a chunk of money based on how many children. Because what we have right now is a system that reinforces identifying students as eligible for special ed.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's very clear that kids have disabilities and they need to be protected under IDEA. In other cases, people see it as a way to get resources.
Right.
We need to shift our thinking so that we're getting kids resources without identifying them as disabled when that's appropriate. So it will, but when there is a fiscal incentive to put kids on IEPs, because then they'll get help, which is the old mindset, that doesn't seem to be working for the kids or for the taxpayers.
So
I didn't
when,
mean to get that into it.
I'm curious, I guess, as they're developing this, or, because as it stands right now, the spectrum of special ed and what services students need is very wide.
Absolutely.
And the cost associated with those services is very wide, and so I wonder how this will play out, because it, depending on the makeup of your student population.
We really have to think about how to give students the services they need differently. It does not mean that you're not going to have, if you had 10 special educators, that you would stop having 10 special educators. You may not fund them all 100% with special ed dollars. You may fund them partly with general ed dollars, partly with special ed dollars, and conserve some of the money that you need for students that need something that is much more specialized and costly.
Interesting.
That's an example.
It's similar to what Children's Mental Health just did with
Yes.
IFS and Integrated Family Services. It's a kid is a kid is a kid. We meet
Right.
them where they're at. It might be long-term, those kids on IEPs, and it, 5 years they need this IEP. Or it might be a kid going through a rough time that you kind of need to just throw in some extra services intermittently. It's really just meeting the kids where they're at instead of, like you said, labeling.
Which is what we try to do. But then in the end, when we get in circumstances where, well, I can only work with this group of kids because they have these labels,
Right. Yep.
then
Yep.
it's not a system that really ends up benefiting our students.
No, not at all.
So I guess,
And there will still be an extraordinary threshold.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They've increased it so that costs over $65,000, or 60 at first. I think it will eventually get to
Turns
65.
into 65.
Will be reimbursed at 95%.
Well,
However, and even though that's a change, that $50,000 threshold that's existed before has been there since I've been in education. So I think it's probably appropriate to adjust for inflation. But those extraordinary costs will be reimbursed at a higher rate. Kids need to be protected, and school districts need to be protected for those unexpected costs. And do you want to update on Power School finance and
Really?
just as Act 46 has been a little
So
uncertain, so is this.
We thought the uniform chart of accounts and the transition to the new school-wide data management system was July 1. I think the AOE is getting enough feedback now that that's probably not going to work. The business rules are yet to be developed. The school districts that have launched so far, or that were supposed to launch successfully, have not launched successfully. Our school's not holding up their end of the bargain in a lot of regards, and so, and that's yet to be sort of worked through. So I know I completed 2 surveys so far, and Julie has completed one that was sent out from the AOE to talk about pushing that back anywhere from a year to 2 years. VASBO, the Vermont Association of School Business Officials, wrote a letter today making all those same points. So we don't know. The reason that matters is because it was supposed to be free as of July 1, and we will probably end up continuing to pay for Infinite Vision, so we'll have to add that into the central office budget again. But it just doesn't make any sense right now to continue down the path. The training that they were providing is all train the trainer, web-based, very time intensive, and so it's just not, hopefully they will listen, but some of those deadlines have to be pushed back, have to go to legislature to have those deadlines pushed back, but I think they probably have the resources and the information they need to actually make that happen. I think it would be very foolish for them not to listen to the feedback they're getting at this point. So we don't know. We've done a lot of work on it so far, but
It's been a huge commitment of the resources of the business office, and they've been right on top of it. So it is a little frustrating to know that you've all held up your end of the bargain and put in all of the time and effort, and yet it's just, there's no evidence. I mean, the survey was asking what functionality we'd be comfortable with
I asked it again today.
as of July 1st. Like, is it
Full?
okay if you just do payroll but have no HR function? We'd like it all to work.
Grasping at straws.
Wow.
It's not, we have something that works we don't want to replace it with something that works a little bit on a good day. So that's, we're very supportive of a pushback. It's just frustrating because
Lose that momentum.
we
that
sort
work.
of, there's a loss of momentum, and we kind of knew that it was going to be like this, and if everything gets pushed another year, we're just
in the
looking
same
at
spot again.
the same situation next year. So if it gets pushed back and with it comes some real course correction and improved professional development and decision-making and leadership from the agency, I think that would be helpful. But if they just push it back and nothing changes, I don't know how I feel about that.
But they are in under contract with Power School for 3 years, so I think there's also some negotiations that have to happen there. But we've used it, even if we do delay, we're going to continue working on it, and even if there is no delay and it just gets thrown out altogether, which I don't think will happen, but we've learned a lot. We're
Right.
cleaning up our chart of accounts, we're having good discussions, so it's not completely a loss, but hopefully we know soon what's going on.
So that's us.
Okay, thank you. So we have our future meetings. So our bond informational meeting and Act 46 update meeting will be February 25th at 6:30 here in the library. We will have our first post-town meeting day board meeting on March 12th at 5:30. And there's a Franklin Northwest board meeting on March 6th at 6:30 in Swanton.
Probably.
Probably.
One of the things we're trying to figure out is, after they have their organizational meeting next week, when the first board meeting will be. So it would be possible that instead of an SU board meeting, they'd have a transition board meeting.
Okay.
So we'll let you know. I don't know who's on deck to attend, or if you would be attending the SU meeting. We've had no problems getting a quorum, so people miss you, but you're also going to other meetings too, so they understand. So I'll make sure that if that changes to a transition board meeting, I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay, was there anything else? All right, that was a quick one. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn the board meeting at 7:12.
I will make a motion to adjourn the board meeting at 7:12.
I will second that.
And all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.